indicating a formula that the city had obligated some funding, or could obligate some funding under. Let me just run through real quickly the way I see the numbers, and then you can ask me if what that really, how that tied into what you were thinking, okay? We had roughly, we got a loan opportunity from the USDA of $2,234,000 is some number that sticks in my head, but and then along with that, they provided a $250,000 grant that would not be repaid. And then that's all they did, but they had a package in front of them that they were looking at of a project that cost roughly $3.1 million, I believe. And of that $3.1 million, that's roughly, there's a grant on that property used to acquire all of the property that's been acquired of, I believe it's 308.9 from deed and another 308.9 from the city. Now that was a separate deal done right during the flood. You know, it had to have been a week after the flood. I think we got the call from deed saying we received the brownfield grant. So whether we had a library or not, we applied for and eliminated the properties at that corner utilizing a brownfield grant, which was a 50-50 match and is not yet completed, but we've probably spent, I don't know, half the money, let's say. And some of it's been ours, some of it's been the state, that type of thing.
So 308 deed, 308 city, $616,000.
Yeah,
towards that corner.
I think that roughly comes to the $3 million something, and there's some cash that would have.
I'm just talking about the deed in city 308 committed. That corner, the
that's a separate grant. Yes, that grant already has been signed and is in force, if you will. It's like the Rintec grant, if you remember, that the city never did exercise. So this one we've been exercising on, and I'm guessing we've probably spent a total out of the 600 of about 400 to acquire and fix things up. And now the electric is another thing that we were going to fix up going down the center. So if this motion passes, and I'm making no judgment about the motion, the other issue you have to consider is, what do you do with the property going forward? If you want it to be in the private sector hands, then you need to undo that grant as well. Because if the city maintains the grant, it can never be sold to the private sector without reversing it. So we'd have to pay back the 308.9 or whatever we've spent, and pay and forego our own costs, whatever we've lost that money then, and in effect get it back to the private sector. If your goal is to make it a beautiful area with trees, then you could keep it and keep it a public parkway. Okay?
But don't misunderstand.
No.
My goal is not to make it a park. My goal is to make it a commercial.
Well, that's what I thought you.
Commercial.
I just want to make sure you understand.
But it should be attractive, and it shouldn't be a dust bowl.
No, and we'd have to undo that to get it back into the private sector. That's my point, and it comes with a cost. So, if we've spent 200 of state money, we have to pay them 200 new monies back, okay? And then try to recover it in sale of the property to someone else. The grant that you speak of from the USDA, the 2.2 million and the 250, I'll try to summarize essentially how it is working with the USDA. When they come in and they put a grant proposal together, they ask you all these questions, and essentially they say to you, without tongue-in-cheek, make sure you make this as much as you could possibly need, want, or otherwise, because once we give you this grant, it's not like you can come back and say, oh, Dad, I need a little extra cash.
The loan, you're talking about the loan.
The whole package from them. So they want to make sure your package is big enough. So we took the very first estimate we had from the architect, which was like, build us a library, what would it cost? And that's what we put in there so that we get to the biggest number. Since then, of course, the architect has then worked with the library board to reduce that number. And they've struggled, and you know, they're no different than any other group. They're struggling with They believe that a city hall and a library should go together. Other people tell them you should not have a city hall there, it should only be a library. And so they've been going back and forth, they keep coming back collectively saying that they want to see the two together. Well, if the two are together, obviously that's going to require the city to contribute something to pay for its share of the building. We have taken that building and pretty much downsized it a lot to make City Hall more relevant to what we have today. Yeah, and we've shared the meeting room, which would hold 60 people in a comfortable environment with speakers and all that stuff. But we've done so trying to keep a handle on what the city portion would really have to be. And I keep reminding them that you haven't agreed to that, that's just a plan. And so when they go out to raise money, they need to raise money only for a library, because they've heard loud and clear, people say to them time after time, if the last thing I would do, I'd give you money for a library, but I'd never give you money for that Rushford City Hall. And so they have to be very clear when they got a package and a proposal that it is only the library that they're being asked to support. And if you think, you know, our job is tough here sometimes, their job is no easier. And they have been meeting, and they've been meeting, and they're meeting again next week, and they have taken action to change directions. And they're working their way through what they see their failures have been to date, because they believe this is an opportunity that can succeed. And I think, quite honestly, Vern, to stop it at this point until they can stand here in front of you and tell you that we don't have a way to do what we said we could do, when they stand here and tell you that, then you should make that motion. But I think in the interest of, there's a lot of people that have spent an awful lot of time working on the library, that it would certainly seem that we ought to give them their opportunity, because they'll never probably have this kind of an opportunity again. If this fails, you know, so be it. And I hear your stuff about the school. I've asked the same questions. I believe their files are full of that exploration about a joint school, and it comes to the same conclusion. That will not work. It comes from the school people that it will not work. Now, I'm just telling you what I've heard because I've sat in on some of those meetings. But they've done that work. And
I think that what we're hearing, certainly what I'm hearing, is that the citizens of Rushford, who are going to contribute to a new school, which is getting closer and closer and closer every day, will never be able to afford, unless things change dramatically in the next 5 or 10 years, they're never going to be able to afford it. They won't pass it, is my fear. And you know, because there's duplication. It doesn't make any sense. If this town can't work together, if we can't collaborate to save ourselves $3 million or $2 million of tax dollars by building and sharing one library, what hope do we have? We're going to price ourselves right out of existence.